And by the way, I mean, I think what Coleman is saying is evidenced by the policies that MLK was pushing for, including a universal basic income. It was a universal basic income, meaning that it would apply to everyone regardless of their race. And I wish Coleman and Hostin's conversation centered more on the most effective policies to move this country forward. But unfortunately, that was the end of the substantive exchange, or at least the substantive portion of their exchange. The back and forth unfortunately devolved from there.
Many in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you?
He's never voted for a Republican.
You said that you're a conservative.
No.
You did. You actually said that in the podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
Yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And I think it's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me.
Look, at a time when someone like Donald Trump has increased his support among Black voters, I feel like maybe it's important to hear Coleman out a little bit, right? He's not a Trump supporter by any means, but are we just going to brush off, people of color who vote Republican as pawns for the right wing? How insanely insulting is that? I think it's more important to understand their arguments, no? And I think you'd have to know about Coleman's background to understand his politics. I'm not kidding when I say I listen to his podcast and I'm a fan of his. It's true that he has never voted for a Republican, even though he considers himself an independent. He's in his 20s and was raised by a Marxist mother who unfortunately and tragically has since passed away. His father, however, was not a Marxist. And on his podcast, he shares stories of spirited debates in his household. And I'm guessing the two opposing political views in his household led to independent thinking, the independent thinking that he tends to demonstrate. You might not agree with the overall thesis of his book, and that's totally fine, that's okay. But immediately dismissing someone who has a different worldview as a pawn or a grifter without addressing the substance of what he's saying is pretty weak. There are bad faith people out there, there's no question. There are grifters, but in my opinion, they're pretty easy to suss out. They have a difficult time explaining themselves. Coleman speaks at length about what he believes, explains why he has these views, and has never been disrespectful to anyone who disagrees with him. I think political discourse in the country would be far better if all aspired to that. Coleman has an open invitation on this show because I actually find it valuable to have him further elaborate on his views, especially the views that he espouses in that book, even if we have areas of disagreement. So Coleman, come on the show, talk about your book. I don't think you're a pawn. And I do think this is an important conversation to have, right? Is color blindness a better approach to improving race relations in the country? Should we focus on race-based economic policies or class-based economic policies? I get it, these are controversial issues, people get super heated, but you gotta put your differences aside, keep an open mind, and engage in a genuine and good faith exchange of ideas. And I'm not saying, that in an effort to launder like some right-wing militia members. I'm saying that in regard to someone who is incredibly thoughtful. And so if you're not familiar with Coleman Hughes, I would hate for Sunny Hostin to paint a picture of him. I would argue that you should listen to his podcast and get to know who he really is before judging his character.